we're kind of doing this project in 2 phases. The first, and mainly because of the way the funding came in. So this phase was for a particular project, and they, their requirements were a little bit different than what we'll be doing for kind of the final version of the tool. And after I kind of go through the demo, I'll kind of talk through what'll be different in the kind of final released. Part of this was where we load one set of data from DHIS2, and this is running on my virtual machine on my computer. So the way this was set up is that it runs through DHIS2 app. So if you're logged into DHIS2, it would also tell you the last time that the data was synced. That doesn't work on my local computer, so that's why it says failed at the bottom. So just for this demo, that's why that's there. So the first step, so mainly what this does is it compares your list of facilities in DHIS2 with your list from the Ministry of Health, which would be a CSV file. So the first step, and everything is kind of linked to your DHIS2 user. This one is set up for Malawi. So I'll just upload a file and hope that I haven't messed up my CSVs. So you upload your CSV, it's going to have the headers, and then you have to kind of show how that aligns with what's in your DHIS2 data. So you go through and say which one is the facility name, which one's the facility code, if you've got latitude and longitude, and then you go through the levels that you have. So for this one, we've got the region is the top, and then zone, and then district. And then you upload that file. And it just warns you that it'll erase, if you've done something before, but in this case, nothing has been done. So it checks it, uploads it, and saves it all to a FHIR server. The next step, you can just kind of view, just get a sanity check on your data to make sure everything looks okay. You can kind of compare it in the table. You can search for particular things, or you can drill down in this tree view, and then when you do the tree view, it'll also sort. So I clicked on northern region, so now this side only shows northern. We could do the same over here so that you could kind of check on the things you want to check. This is just, again, mainly just for kind of viewing what's there to make sure there's no glaring errors in what you uploaded. The main step would be to reconcile. So this one, it's pretty straightforward. It did the automatic matching, so it matched the 3 that it had in the MOH data to what we had in the datum side. This will show you what's there. If for some reason there was an error, you could break it and then pick something different. But in this data, the data set is pretty good. So then we'd go to the next level. It's going to do its automatic matching. Right now it's doing, it looks for an internal identifier that the datum data may have had to link the IDs, and then the next step is it uses text and it makes sure the parents are the same. So that again, when we get to the zones, there's 5 zones. The names already match, so everything worked fine in linking it with the DHIS2 data. You can see there's none left. We do have some on the datum side, but for this case, we don't care. And that's just things that were in DHIS2 that needed to be deleted anyway. So we go to the next level. Again, all these match, so nothing too interesting. I can just show you if we wanted to break one. It just warns you that since it was automatically matched, there's not going to be any scoring. And so if we click on it, it didn't find any matches because there was no automatic scoring done, but we can recalculate the scores up here. And when you manually break something, it's not going to automatically match it again. But now if I click on it, it will give me something with the score of 0, and this is a Levenstein distance score, so the lower the better. 0 means it was an exact match. So you could go in and say, okay, that is the right one, and save it. And then since we've got 100% of them done, we can go to level 4, which is the facility level. So now it's doing the scoring and then just showing the results of what's left. So we can see it's still pulling in the datum data. There's going to be a lot more there, but we can see here there's 11 that it wasn't able to automatically match. If we look at the bottom, we can see 773, and you can kind of scroll through the table and do the same thing, break apart matches if things don't make sense. We can probably continue while that's loading, but so you can then click on one. You can kind of see, this gives you a little bit more about what the scoring was, so you can see the distance, if there was any latitude or longitude. I think one of them is blank, and that's why it's showing such a large distance. But you can see the scores of what it potentially thinks. You can step through them and try to see if for some reason there was a misspelling. You can also click show all suggestions, and that will give you all 308 unmatched, and as you sort of scroll through, it just gives you everything. You can do a search up here if we were trying to look for air wing, and that's not found. Or if you search for clinic, it'll tell you everything. It limits your results to everything that has clinic in it. If for some reason it changed, you can say, oh, I know that one changed, so this is the name of it. I can save that match if it was renamed at some point, and then that will go in there. Mainly, you could come in and say, okay, this is a new one. I know that's not there, so I can just click no match. And basically, you just go through that whole process, either matching them. You can also flag something if you want to say, oh, maybe this is it. I'm not quite sure, so I'll flag it. And then that will show up down here under the flagged ones. So someone else can come in and say, oh, yeah, that's right, and confirm it. Or, oh, no, that's wrong, and then they can release that, and it goes away. As you can see, we can also see the ones I set where there wasn't a match. And then, of course, there's all these. And at any point, you can kind of come in and see the status of everything that has been done. Generally, you might want to do this at the end. You can kind of see, I'm zoomed in a little bit, so that's why the buttons aren't showing up. But we could go down to the facilities. I can also zoom back out to the regular size if that is visible for everyone. So yeah, so you can kind of see, here's all this is level 4, so these are the facilities. Someone could review it. And right now, that's kind of what we do. And we pull out the results. It's all in a MCSD Fire server to kind of look at the results, all the matches that are made. You can query from there. So what we're planning on doing for the kind of final release is to add a little bit more control over your data and how things are done. So, instead of just having, one's a DHIS2 and then you upload your CSV, you'll be able to kind of manage your various data sets. So you could say, I want to add a DHIS2, and you can type in your credentials in the URL for the DHIS2, and it'll pull that in. You could upload a CSV file. You could point to an existing Fire MCSD server. That's the main ones that we have for now. We could also look at other ones, but you could do multiple DHIS2 servers, and you can kind of manage the data that way. And then you would pick 2 of them to reconcile, and then a place to save the matching. So you kind of pick 3 data sets and where you want to save it, so that you could potentially match multiple times. So you could take your master facility list and you could match it to DHIS2, and then you get a result where you've got the IDs mapped. Then you could take your master facility list and link it to some other MOH system, and you could save it to the same place. So now you'd have all 3 in one database to kind of query. And we were also going to have a way to kind of export these results as a CSV file, or you could download it as a Fire bundle, or you could just get a CSV that kind of gives you the details. So that's some of the changes we're planning on for the final version, or the next iteration, I guess. Final is probably not the right term. So yeah, so that's the quick view of what it does and how everything works. So if there's any questions or anything anybody wants to talk about.
Very cool. Thanks. Yeah. And any questions from anybody on this utility? One thing I would be interested too is if you guys could tell us a little bit more about how this maybe connects to the GOFR work as well. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that.
Well, again, I mean, the main part of the GOFR is to set up the facility reconciliation. So again, it would be where you can kind of choose multiple data sets, and then your kind of final results would have this mapping. You could have this feedback into a master facility list or again some global registry. So I mean, some of the plans are to link in with like healthsites.io, be able to pull their data in, so that you can compare that to the master facility list or what other ministry data you may have for the country. So yeah, so basically, the end result, it's sitting there in a FHIR server, so you can query that FHIR server to get your matches. That it'll have the multiple identifiers, and then ideally, if you do for some reason need to maintain a multiple set of identifiers, you'll have one place where you could kind of resolve them. So you can say, okay, the master facility list has this ID. If I want to talk to DHIS2, I can query that, get the DHIS2 ID, and then I know it's the same information. Or from any system, you'll be able to look up by identifier and find the correct identifier for all the other various systems. And of course, you can also maintain the data in this MCSD server if that's kind of where you want to save things.
Yeah, no, very cool. Well, yeah. Any questions from anybody? I have a couple on my end, but I'll let everybody else go first in case anyone has any questions.
Yep. Hi guys. Sorry, I've actually joined late, which is I'm going to have to revisit the application. But Luke, thank you very much, and we're looking forward to working with the software. And it's great. I see Gretchen is on the line, and Gretchen, I know that you are keeping Doug and the eHealth Africa team in the loop with regards to the use stories or the use cases that you're working on in Liberia and Sierra Leone. My understanding is that is where we are testing these GOFR tools. And that's where a lot of the integration is happening. So Gretchen, I would appreciate it if you could speak to that, and just sort of flag any challenges that you're seeing. And then Luke, the other thing that I've got a question about is, are you intending to establish a presence for GOFR tools somewhere on the internet in the form of a website or something where people can look at the work being done and understand who's developing it, etc.?
I'm not sure what the long-term plans are. We could certainly potentially set up something for people to play around with. I mean, we've got all the code up on GitHub and available right now. We kind of have two branches split up as we're starting to do kind of the GOFR side and add the additional features for that.
Okay. Well, I mean, I understand that there's a GitHub repository, but I'm just thinking from an institutional perspective, and seeing some sort of definition of the project in the form of a web page would be pretty cool. And the mission and the goal and like where it's going, because it's such a critical piece of infrastructure. And so, like from my side, it seems that WHO needs to be clearly represented there. But that's just kind of how I see things. But just a sort of a design metaphor showing the nature of the entity behind the work. I would have thought would have been something that would be useful for everybody. Because at the moment it's a piece of technology. and a GitHub repository. So yeah. Gretchen, can you?
Hey, Mark. I think I agree with that. At the moment, we don't have immediate plans for setting that up, but we have a lot of the requirements document and sort of the process document that have been worked on, and currently the different partners are working on the technical design draft. And those are like in a Google Drive, and I think it's pretty close to being releasable to the public. I would just have to check whether we have any contractual things that are where the access rights might be wrong. So I think that could be a good start to have like the more visibility into that, and we could add like a little bit more verbosity on the README and link to that as a start.
Okay. Cool. Thanks, Niels. Gretchen, can I get that feedback from you?
Sure. Hi, Mark. I have been working closely with Richard and Luke, and we have been going through the technical design, and very much a lot of what they're looking to retrofit on the datum prototype for GOFR, it came directly from the requirements that the 3 countries that are represented put forth. I think the general consensus is we're asking for way more than a V1 can handle. So we're going through the process now of trying to figure out, what minimum viable looks like versus, hopefully an additional version after this. So we're still working through all of that. And yeah, if Niels can make that technical design public, you'll see that there's still quite a bit of conversation going on as far as the details go. And that's just an ongoing conversation that IntraHealth and eHealth Africa have been pretty closely operating toward.
This is Richard. Thank you, Gretchen. So, yeah, just kind of just to keep going with that, to kind of riff off of that, what you folks have been saying. I think that one area, it's hard to look at this. We're in the weeds right now. This is a specific tool built for a specific use case. You're already inside a DHIS2 in this app, the way that it's operating right now. You've already kind of selected one of the countries inside it, and then you're matching against another country in which you upload the CSV. So it doesn't really give you a zoom out of what it could look like. So it would be great to have your input. One thing is, as Luke said, there'll be the opportunity to use different data sources. So if you zoom out a bit, we discussed. Some of you were able to make it. I hope we see more next year. But we were at the OpenHIE first annual meeting, and the GOFR. One thing that came out of that for me was, the GOFR thing, Global Open Facility Registry, isn't meant to be, of course, anything owned by just the people working on this contract. It's actually a much broader ecosystem, a broader platform, really. So one tool on that platform, and those tools can be built by anyone, contributed by anyone, is a reconciliation tool. It was just a use case that made a lot of sense to go with first. It was because there's a lot of pain points around that. So starting with the tool, but in a broader platform, and I don't know necessarily what that platform would look like, but even if it were just tabs inside the existing tool, in which the facility reconciliation tool is just a tab, right? It's just one part of a broader monolith or something that you plug into. And so there's maybe a data sources tab in which you can configure different data sources and export them or import them as you need. Maybe there's an authorization tab or something. So I think that I would look at the tool as an entry point to a much bigger project. I don't know what Nils and Carl Leitner had in mind. They might have a bigger vision or something different, but I think that there's a lot of space here for others to really jump in. And so maybe the folks who, at Instead, or the folks at eHealth Africa, folks, want to build a tool, right, that sits on top of a global facility registry, or is kind of part of that ecosystem of a global open facility registry. And I think that's the plan, right? I mean, that's the point, is that there's this beautiful platform that we can start building on, and this is just one piece of it. So that's kind of what I see. So I think, Scott, you asked the question about the how it fits into the broader ecosystem, and I hope it is only a part of a much broader platform. Anyway, that's just one point. Another thing is, if we can get into the weeds a little bit, there are some. Go ahead, Gretchen.
Yeah, this is Gretchen. I can't agree with you more, and I think it really speaks to what Mark was looking for, which is a place that looks like a hosted ecosystem for GOFR versus, the reconciliation tool itself. So Nils, I think that's a couple of plus ones for a, sort of a platform presence for GOFR.
So one other thing I'll drop in is at some point in this call, because we have so many experts on the call, it's not normal that we have this, I think. So I see that Maguette is here, and Jennifer Shivers is here, and of course Gretchen is here. Eileen is now on the call. So I'd like to also discuss, if we can, Scott, at some point, where people see a tool like this fitting in terms of a workflow, like with the ministry counterparts. So someone logs in to use the tool. Well, where do they log in? Do they log into their own system and to a separate system? Do they log into DHIS2 to use it? Do they go to some other website? And so that's a really big, outstanding question. I'm just going to drop that in. Hopefully we could address.
I think that's a great question, Richard. Anyone have any initial thoughts on that one? I'd love to hear from the community. Well, so I have one example. Maybe this will spur some related ones. So we've run through this process a couple times, Richard, and like oftentimes it's been like historically this has been done like manually or kind of like in a data munging kind of fashion, by an analyst or something like that. Potentially also paired with kind of like microtasking, right? Divvying up the lists and letting people who know the answers, start to do the process. And it's been a painful one. I think like a couple patterns we've seen is like there's oftentimes not 2 lists, but like 5 lists, right? And how do you handle many lists, outside of just like, there's an MFL and there's an HMIS, but then there's also supply chain and there's, M&E and, some mHealth apps and all kinds of stuff, right? So we've like that has always been like one complicating factor, is like there's this kind of like I feel like the rubber meets the road when lists start to multiply and the reality of governance meets like this kind of more pragmatic need to just reconcile, hey, this site here is the same as this site here, and okay, we have a mapping of IDs. And like in terms of workflows, I always found that kind of like a interesting point in the process of like, well, hey, is the governance clear of like who's kind of managing and the steward of the central list, right? And everybody is kind of like matching and contributing to that, or is there like a federated kind of approach, right? And so, I think like one tidbit I would share is like, well, hey, make sure that kind of like governance work is done ahead of this, important kind of mapping and cleaning of the data part.
I'm going to push you a bit more, Scott. I want more.
Go for it.
Because this has been also brought up by the initial use case owners, which is, hey, we need to deal with federated lists. Now, and we were talking about this with Gretchen on use cases in West Africa, which is, different lists are going to be owned by others and parts of lists. And so how are we going to manage that? So how does that governance or that use case get reflected in this information system? And that is a really big, outstanding question. So I'd love it if others have thoughts, or if you can just go deeper into what you think. I mean, what's worked?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen. I mean, like I've heard of people talking about the importance of federation a lot, but I just haven't seen it like in a really robust way. I think, maybe my personal just experience on that is like it's a bit of a symptom of a deeper conversation about like what the governance is. It's like maybe not everyone is bought into the suggested governance that's being discussed, right? And so I think that might be part of it, but I mean, like, I think the reality of a federated approach is that there needs to be like a consolidated list of those, pieces, right? Whether it's public, private, or, northern region, southern region, or however the kind of federation is happening. And then the reality is, like, when you are reconciling, right, like at the central level, you're really not in control of the record, right? So that group that manages all the private sites would be the one responsible for reconciling the private data together. And I'm not sure how that would play out in this this app. I think that adds a complication to it, obviously. But I
mean, the way this was set up is it wasn't intended to modify the source data. So that's what you have to kind of, because it's just too many unknowns, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to figure out, once you have the mapping done, you figure out how you want to update your source, your two source data or multiples. And again, the way it's planned for the next version is that you'll be able to upload multiple data sources. I mean, right now, at least for the first version, you would just kind of do two at a time, but you could start with, if you pick the master facility list, and then you can reconcile that against HMIS, and then you could reconcile that against supply chain, and all save to one place. So when you're done, you have, one data set that has, here are the 5 identifiers for this facility, and on down. And then also, I think one thing you had mentioned was about breaking up the work, and sorry, I forgot to mention this, but we do have it where you can kind of divide things, like, and right now it's not, exactly, it would have to be done, externally to kind of decide who gets what. But you could go in and you can kind of click here and say, I'll do the southern region. There's only one, so that's not that, in this case, it doesn't really make sense to divide up. But, if there were a bunch, I can do southern, you can do northern, somebody else can do central, and that's how you could divide up the work of doing the manual piece of the matching. Obviously, in this case, there's not really enough to matter.
I totally agree. I mean, I think that's a logical way to break it up, because oftentimes, like, the person doing the matching really needs to be like somebody from the central region, or who is intimately aware.
They're going to have to know the data.
They're
going to have to be familiar with it to really make the good decision, to make the best decision.
Or at least, know who to call to say, like, hey, is this, MAFCO Health Center the same as this other MAFCO Health Center or something, right? So, that's cool. I had a question. Maybe this kind of backs up a little bit, but I was just curious if the the administrative region data between the two lists doesn't match yet. So, like, we kind of have like dimensions of reconciliation, right? So imagine they don't have a common hierarchical tree associated to the sites. Is that something that's still manageable in this, or like how would you all handle that, or is that kind of like a pre-step that needs to happen before utilizing the tool?
Well, there's two kind of ways. I mean, the way this one was set up, and again, this was for a particular use case, that the hierarchy would need to be equivalent. So whether everything, it doesn't necessarily have to match. That's how you kind of go through the levels. You kind of start at the top and you say, okay, first I need to map the regions, then I need to map the zones, then I need to map the districts. And obviously then if both data sets, if that doesn't make sense, then it doesn't really work. But for this version, that was part of the requirements. And so what we're thinking of for the next version is that you would kind of have two options. You could do the hierarchy, or you could just ignore the hierarchy. That way you could do, where the hierarchy doesn't make sense to align, because you may have administrative regions, and then you may have supply chain, could be completely different regions, and they don't make sense to align. But you do want to align the facilities at the bottom, so you would really just be trying to match the bottom and kind of ignoring the hierarchy. So that's what we're thinking of for the next version, is that there would be an option to kind of ignore the hierarchy and not do the hierarchical steps, and only do facility matching. And then at that point, it would just be looking at kind of the name, ideally longitude and latitude if available. But since the parent won't be relevant at that point, it won't be able to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, could you treat the the field of the parent node as just like a text entity that you would still plug into your algorithm that produces the score as well. So like, while it's not like looking at the tree and how the tree is structured, it's just saying like, hey, Central Eastern Zone is like roughly spelled the same as Central Eastern or something, right?
Yeah, we could certainly use it for scoring if it kind of made sense. I mean, the hierarchy would be loaded for both. It just, if they don't really align. I mean, the hard part comes. I mean, yeah, we could do it as a text. We'd have to do some special change to make it do it as a text match instead of because right now it uses kind of the identifier, so it has to map. You do the mapping first, and then if they are the same, it does it. I mean, the question is whether if it's close enough to where that makes sense, then is the hierarchy kind of aligned, or is it completely separate? Because it could be, again, you have a Northeast region for administrative could be different from a Northeast region for supply chain, but obviously there would be a lot of overlap. You would think it's just kind of around the edges. There'd be some that wouldn't match, but yeah, so we could potentially have that as a choice to look at the text to give an additional score.
Yeah. I mean, just something to consider. I think we've seen a lot of like that the trees are sometimes defined the same. Like the structure is supposed to be the same, but like how the data itself or that metadata is defined and encoded is often messy, or of varying quality or different degrees of specificity.
If it's meant to be the same, then the system should be able to handle that, and you can kind of align them even if there some variations in the naming. But if the intention is that they mean the same regions, and that's where you would come in and you would say, all right, so this is showing, this Mavera Army camp is in Doha district, but maybe there's Mavera Army camp in another district. You could kind of show all the suggestions and then find it. Or maybe it's called, it's this one, Mavera Mission Health Center, and then you can kind of find it that way. So you can still kind of do things like that, but yeah, we might need to make some tweaks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice. Well, yeah, I mean, I can see a lot of use for something like this. I think it would have helped a couple, implementations we've been a part of save quite a bit of time. So, yeah, like in terms of moving forward, I know you guys were talking a little bit about this, but like how do people, engage with you all to take advantage of it, or, should they just wait until GOFR, is leveraging it and use it through there? How are you all thinking about it?
Oh, I mean, it depends on what people's needs are. I mean, if this version is close enough to what someone's doing, they could certainly try it out and then give us feedback. If they've got, a little bit different where it's not just DHIS2 and a CSV file, then waiting for the next version might be better because we'll already kind of have the plans to you've got plans for that, and it may better suit their needs. So it really just depends on what people are doing, and the timeline's not super long, so it's not like it would be a long wait. I think we should have something next month around there. I think that's what the deadlines are, though don't quote me on that. But yeah,
I think there's it is a bit it's a bit hairy to get installed in movie, so it's more oriented towards developers right now. At this point, it's in the very back end, there's a Mongo database, and that is being kind of manipulated by Hearth, Gembee's Fire server, and then the backend app, business logic stuff, is a separate app, of course, and that is using Redis in-memory data store, and then there's a front end. Which is here, which is what we're seeing. So it is a bit, if you really want to get started directly, then check the datum branch of the tool on GitHub and look in packaging, and there's instructions on how we set it up, but I'm happy to take anyone through a tutorial next week or something if they want to try to set it up themselves, but it's a little bit more developer oriented for now. I think we'll need to package. We will have to package it up much better. And I also think that one thing that would really be helpful, especially in this community, is, is again, if we zoom out a bit and think of where things like this fit together. You have this, amazing set of tools being, offered to the world by the health sites folks, who are taking, a very citizen approach on the ground. Anyone can get involved in development. You can get to see, where health facilities are, help map those, contribute those to a global good, and that is fantastic. And kind of at the opposite end of that, right, you have the datum tool, which is government owned. Really, I mean, it's funded by entities that are working directly with host governments to try to meet their needs. And at some point, it would be great, either in this community or to discuss kind of where these things going to meet. Is it under the broader global open facility registry ecosystem, or are we going to lobby Mark and his team to be part of kind of a health sites open registry ecosystem? Or is this a platform, this specific tool, and there are many tools on this platform that still cater more to NGO or government needs? And I don't know the answers to those questions, but I just want to propose that we're looking at growth here and really expanding this out and looking for a coherent vision. So this community is really critical in achieving that. Thanks.
Yeah, Richard, I'd like to emphasize and reinforce the point you're making, especially about the zooming out. At the moment where the project is very much in the initial phases of the GOFR reconciliation part. So the datum part is a little bit further ahead because it was needed, and so it was prioritized quite highly. And we're lucky to have our 3 country partners that are working in Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia to help us understand how the GOFR tool can be used on the ground. And that goes further than just the reconciliation. That really is about understanding of what are the current gaps in the countries to manage the facility registry information, and where can this tool fit in? What does it have to do to be able to answer the needs that those countries have? And that's where I also see like a great potential for collaboration with this group, because as we've seen at the OpenHIE meeting in Arusha, there is a lot of other countries that have made a lot of valuable experiences with facility registries. So I would be interested to explore, and maybe this is something that we can discuss, whether it would make sense. Part of our project was that the different partners have provided answered a questionnaire, which sort of gave like a broad understanding of how the different countries are dealing with master facility data, where the data is stored, who is managing it. And I would love to see those, and they are a little bit detailed and very targeted towards the GOFR reconciliation tool. But I think that there is sort of a valuable core piece here also to maybe have some kind of country profiles emerge out of this that could be shared maybe publicly on the OpenHIE website as part of this community, and to invite others, implementers or country representatives. I know we have Jeremiah here on the call, for example, and to invite them to describe in a brief and very high-level, understandable form how they are dealing with facility registry data, what their current challenges are, and as a small added value for the GOFR project would be to understand how the tool can fit in those different contexts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, a great point, Niles. Yeah, Jeremiah, would you like to? I saw you raised your hand. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So thank you very much, everybody, and thanks as well, Luke, for the in-depth presentation. So from Malawi, we're actually using the tool right now. We're just working with it this very day. I think I also raised an issue on the Slack channel, and basically I have two experiences that I would like to share. The first one is more technical, and so maybe to Luke and the team, we were trying to get it set up, and we just wanted to make sure that we've got the right configuration changes that we need to get to make it to get it set up on our instance. So the ones that we noticed were to obviously set the DHIS2 host and credentials, as well as to set the DHIS2 org units and ID in the store file, in the UX store file. And then we also noticed that we had to create a DB archive file, which was preventing the original upload from happening. And so apart from those changes that we needed to make, is there any other things that we need to be, because we're doing it on a test server right now, but before we go to production, is there any other thing that we need to take to be aware of in terms of making the configurations work for us?
I mean, I can't think of anything right now off the top of my head, but I mean, we have made additional changes, so I don't know which version you're pulling in or which branch, so that could be something to check. I mean, we can also take this offline if you want to reach out to me. We can kind of work through it and make sure we can get it set up for you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think we'll do that just to get that technical confirmation done. But very quickly, just to come back to what Niels was talking about, basically our use case with this tool is sort of like an onboarding tool for all the systems that want to connect to the interoperability layer and are trying to share facility data. So we're using it obviously to start off with DHIS2 and then map DHIS2 data to sort of match it with the data that we're using for the Master Health Facility Registry. And then once we do that, then everything else will be done through mediators in terms of the Master Health Facility Registry is the only one that will be updated or add new facilities will be added. And so from then on, the mediators will be able to, DHIS2 will ask, the interoperability layer to say, hey, do you have any new facilities that we should know about? And using the matching that was made from the tool, we'll be able to fetch the new facilities and then sort of add them into DHIS2. So and then if there's another system like OpenLMIS that wants to come to the party, then we're going to use the tool to bring them on board to get the matching done with OpenLMIS. But we're using it mostly just to onboard any new system that wants to share facility data. And then after that, our mediators are going to take over the synchronization.
Jeremiah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Wow. Niels was mentioning that these, some like very simple country kind of profiles are just like the story, of how you're going about this would be interesting. If you all would like to produce something like that, we can put it up on the OpenHIE wiki and share it with the community. I think other people would find that really interesting and, to help kind of showcase your work and a lot of people could learn from that. So, there's an open invitation for anybody that is, starting to solve these problems and working on these challenges to kind of, document that experience and wants to share it out. We totally welcome that. So, I just wanted to share that. So Niles or Jeremiah, if you guys have things like that you want to share or produce, we'd be happy to do that together. So.
I think it would be nice. Well, we're not donors, but I think it would be nice to see, and then over the next 6 months, over the next year that, you know, Reconcile, I'll just kind of look at who's on the call. It's Sanity Health, RTI, Reconcile, health sites. Example, I really like to see some new proposals to add tools to a global facility registry, or tools that could be part of a larger ecosystem of facility oriented tools, like the mediators that Jonathan just mentioned, things like that with a little bit of funding could really push us in a direction where we have a lovely suite of tools to help with managing facility lists as a government, or managing analytics, dealing with facility lists in your analytics, dealing with facility lists in your surveys and censuses, dealing with facility lists as an NGO. And it really starts to see a suite of things that you all could raise money for and put out into the world. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, no, a great point, Richard. Yeah, perhaps we could, in one of our upcoming calls, we could have some brainstorming around the kinds of things, to help push the bar forward. I think that'd be great. So,
be awesome.
Great. Well, we have about 5 minutes left, or a little bit more. Any other questions for Luke or for Jeremiah or anybody else on the call about the reconciliation tool or the other topics we've covered today?
Not a question, but related to what was just said. I mean, there's going to be a Notice D call at some point, I think towards the end of the year or beginning of next year. Of course, that might be a great way to submit some proposals around those topic areas. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that we do have a Slack channel for GOFR on the Digital Square workspace, and I pasted the link in the chat. And for like any follow-ups, I think that would be a great way to like engage with some of our partners.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Nils.
All right. Any other last comments or questions from anyone? All right. Well, why don't we? Go ahead. Yeah.
Hello.
Sorry. Please. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. This is John from Tanzania. Yeah, I have a comment. Actually, I wanted to congratulate those guys for a good tool, but I had a comment. Instead of importing data to DHIS2 for reconciliation, I was thinking maybe if it's possible, maybe system can be designed in such a way that for two systems which has a different information, facility reconciliation can be in the middle for reconciling data between the two systems instead of importing system data direct to DHIS2.
Yeah, no, great question. Go ahead, Luke. Yeah.
In the next version, there'll be options for that. I mean, again, this one was specific to comparing DHIS2 with the CSV file. So in the next version, you'd be able to compare two CSV files or two DHIS2 instances, or if you've got your data in FHIR format, you could compare two different systems that way. If it's in a different format, we'd have to kind of figure out, or there need to be some way to convert it to be usable, but we could certainly do that, and it shouldn't be that hard to set up ways to load that data that way.
Okay, great.
All right, great. Yeah, thanks, Luke. Yeah, Luke, maybe when you all get to your next to that release that you mentioned, we can reshare it out to the group and make sure everybody's aware of it. So I think it'd be great.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, fantastic. Well,
I think nice as well to do a follow-up demo in a few months or something when things have settled down a bit. We've got a bit more polished product that someone could actually install themselves more easily and things like that. So I think that'd be a good idea if anyone's interested.
Yeah, Richard would love to get that on the books. I think that'd be great. So, all right, well, fantastic. Well, why don't we wrap up for today? Just wanted to say, thanks to Luke and Richard for sharing about this, and appreciate everybody joining in the great conversation. Hope everybody in the Southeast stays dry in the next couple days too. So, thanks everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.